Paper berries make a great filler flower for in any kind of bouquet. They make a huge statement right on their own, and they're really easy to make. Keep watching to find out how to make your own. Hi, I'm Michelle from How Much She Paper Blooms, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make these berries from crepe paper. One of the great things about this stem is you don't need any template, you can just watch this video and then get started straight away. Another great thing about this stem is you can make all sorts of different berries from the same method. So obviously this is a white berry and I'm intending this to be used in a winter bouquet, so it's more like a snowberry. But you can use it any time of year, and you can also do them in all sorts of different colours. So this works really nicely in a white obviously, but also in a red, so more like your traditional red berry. Also a great one to try with this technique is to make a blueberry stem. It's exactly the same method, just using obviously blue berries, but they look fantastic as a filler flower in almost any kind of bouquet. So I do recommend that you dye it using alcohol ink, so maybe use 2 or 3 different shades of blue, and you'll get that kind of blotchy blueberry colour, and it looks really realistic when it's done. So I'll insert a photo here of a bouquet that I did which features the blueberries using this method, and you can see what I mean. They work great as filler flowers, just have that little bit of extra texture and more variety to your bouquet as well. So I highly recommend you give that a try, and if you do give it a try, I'd love to see how they turn out. But as I say, this works great for all sorts of different colours of berries, so you can do your more traditional, or you can do the white as I'm doing today, and just experiment and see how they turn out. The great thing about berries is they do actually come in a lot of colours and sizes, so you can have some fun with these, and they look great in all sorts of different bouquets as well. So to get started, you're only going to need a few materials. I recommend a medium to heavyweight crepe paper. You can use pretty much any as long as they're not too thin. Obviously I'm using a white. I'm actually using Italian crepe paper for this one, but you can use any, it doesn't really matter. You'll need some tacky glue, and I like to use the Aleene's tacky glue. I'm using a 22 gauge wire and an 18 gauge, but you can use any different sizes that you prefer or that you just have in. It's not too specific for something like this. I would recommend you use some scrap paper though to thicken the stem, and I'll show you how to do that. So any kind of leftover crepe paper you have is going to work. So you'll need some scissors, ideally something with a very sharp point on the end like this. You'll also need some household pliers. So I do recommend that you finish your berries in some kind of sealer because it gives it that extra shine and makes them look more realistic. So I'm using the matte finish Mod Podge. You could use this in the gloss as well, or if you don't have this, some kind of PVA based glue, or you could also use your tacky glue and just water it down. You just need to leave it a little bit longer to dry them. Whichever option you choose, you'll need a little paintbrush to apply that with. To get started, you need to cut 2 squares of crepe paper about 1 inch square. You can actually use any type of crepe paper for this. I would recommend the thicker ones like a doublet or even a heavyweight. This is the Italian heavyweight that I'm using here. It doesn't matter which you use though, as long as it's stretched all the way out. Cover each of those in glue. I like to decant my glue into a small pot just so it's easier to work with. I'm using tacky glue for this, and tacky glue works best when it's got a little bit of air exposure to it. When it's brand new, it's a little bit runny, and it still works just as well. It's just that when it's a little bit older and it's had a little bit more exposure to the air, it goes a bit thicker and it just dries quicker, and it's just a bit easier to work with. So I like to decant mine into this little pot, and I also use a cocktail stick or a toothpick just to spread the glue on as well. So make sure you completely cover the square with glue, and then we're just going to fold it in on itself and roll it into a ball between our fingers. So just like you probably did as a kid with like plasticine or Play-Doh, you're just going to make a ball. And then we'll take the second layer and wrap the ball just to finish off and give it a smooth edge. You can also add a third layer at this point if you want to make some of your berries a little bit larger. Once you've done that, make sure to roll the ball around in your hands a little bit just to smooth everything out and make sure it's all really well stuck down. Repeat that process till you have as many berries as you'd like. There's no fixed amount here. I do think an odd number looks better, but it's totally up to you. To give you an example, I have 23 berries on this stem, but it's up to you whether you want something smaller or bigger, it makes no difference. Once you have all of your berries done, I like to go back through and do a quick check and make sure any loose bits of paper are then restuck down. And then also I like to roll them in my hands again just once more to smooth everything out. Now, you don't want your berries to be perfectly round, otherwise they're not going to look too realistic. So I recommend that you squash them between your index finger and your thumb, and then roll it to get more of an oval shape. Because the glue is still wet at this point, they should squash quite easily. So just don't let the glue dry too much until you've done this stage. Next, we want to cut a variety of different lengths of wire. So you can use any thickness of wire here. I'm using a 22 gauge here. You could definitely use something bigger or smaller. We want these to be lots of different lengths, ranging from 2 to about 5 inches long. And then you need to be able to poke a hole into the berry that we just created. Again, this is going to be easier if the glue is still a bit damp, but it's not impossible if it has dried. I left mine to dry overnight and they're actually quite solid as I'm doing this. You just need to use a little bit more force to poke that hole. So you can use the end of your scissors, or you can use some kind of sharp pointy object you might have. I actually have this weeding tool from my Cricut machine, which is perfect for this, so that's what I'm going to use. But you don't need to buy one of those, especially if you don't have anything pointy like that. Just use the tip of your scissors and it'll do the same job. So you basically want to create a hole and then dip the end of that wire into your tacky glue and then put the wire into the hole. And then just push the berry onto it just to make sure that it's stuck. So next we're going to create the fringe detail on the top of the berry. So you want a thin strip of paper to do this. So stretch out your crepe paper. The height of it doesn't matter too much, but it's a lot easier the taller it is. We're going to trim it down anyway, so this is purely just to make it easier for you to handle. So mine's about an inch tall. I recommend maybe going a bit bigger than that if you're not sure, if you think it might be too fiddly. So you take the thin strip and it's probably about 1/4 to 1/2 inch wide. And you just want to twist that between your fingers and then fold it over and twist it again. Then using the sharp tool that you used before, you want to create another hole in the opposite end of the berry, so it's basically the top of the berry. Dip the folded part of the fringe into your glue and then put that into the hole on the top of the berry. So as you do it, you want to kind of twist into the hole as well, and that I found just helps it to stick a bit better. And then take your scissors and just trim that really close to the berry, so you've just got that tiny little bit that's sticking up that adds that extra detail to make it more realistic. So this next step is actually optional, but I do highly recommend it because it makes so much more realistic looking berries. And it also helps to preserve the stem so that it's more durable as well. So I recommend you use some Mod Podge to paint the berries. I'm using the matte finished Mod Podge, which actually has a little bit of a sheen to it anyway. But if you want, you can use the glossy one, which gets even more of a gloss to it. And then just use a small paintbrush and cover each of the berries in that. And then once you have those all done, just stand them up somewhere so that they can dry. It usually takes about an hour or so. I actually use this little pot of cocktail sticks just to stand them in. It's perfect for that. Once all your berries are dry, then we're going to cover all the stems in floral tape. If you don't have brown, you could use green. It's just a bit more wintry to use the brown. And you want to start that from the very underside of the berry. I do recommend adding a little bit of glue as well because this can quite often become unstuck over time. And then just wrap that, stretching it out as you go around the stem. You only need to do this from about an inch and a half from the top of the stem at this stage. We're going to cover the rest as we work, so don't worry too much about that. Once you've done that with all of your berries, you then want to take 2 of them, cross them over and twist the wires about halfway down so you create this twisted X shape. And then you can go in and add an extra berry onto that bunch and just offset that 3rd one a little bit from the other 2. So I dropped that down by about 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, just to give it a bit of variety. And then wrap that whole bunch down to nearly towards the end with your floral tape. Just make sure as you're wrapping the floral tape round, you add in glue as you work and keep pulling that really tight to get a nice secure fix on that. Repeat that several times so you've got quite a few bunches, depending on how many you're going for in total. You can do the same process with 2, 3 or 4. Once you have all of your little bunches, we're then going to join some of them together. So again, we're going to offset them so that you have these little clusters. You can reposition them slightly as you're working as well, but you can also then go in and tweak at the end as well, so don't worry too much about that. So to join all of the clusters together, you want to take your main stem. So mine here is an 18 gauge. I do recommend something thicker at this point, given that you're going to have a lot of weight on the top of the stem. So take your first bunch and attach that to the top of the wire, just a slight overlap with it. Add lots of glue and then wrap that really tightly with your floral tape, just to make sure that there's a good connection for a few inches down from the top. You can also continue to wrap the whole thing if you want to, but you don't need to at this stage. So now we're going to join together two of the bunches in the same way as we did before. So you can bend them in opposite directions so that they look more realistic. Just think about how this would look in nature, which way they would bend. So you can bend these in opposite directions and then glue the flat pieces that are together, so then there's a nice secured connection. So the glue goes at the point that it bends. Again, wrap it with floral tape and you can tweak these either now or later or both. You'll see I'm adding a little extra kind of tail on the bottom of the floral tape, which is just floral tape, which is twisted. There's no wire in that section. And that is just to make the transition between the end of the wire a lot smoother without that nasty bump that you get where a wire ends. And then to complete the stem, we're just going to keep working in the same way. So you add in a smaller bunch, you can offset it, you can bend it in the opposite direction, you can add a cluster, and you can just actually have a bit of fun with this. Depending on what you want to use your berry stem for, you might want your berries to be quite close together, you might want them to be quite separated, so just have a think about what your end use is going to be, and then position your bunches accordingly. If you prefer, you can leave it as one stem as is and make this two separate ones or three, so they're just smaller with less berries on. You can create little clusters. You don't need to have the long length of wire either at the bottom, you can just have a small one. There's quite a few options of what you can do with this. Just make sure that as you're working you are offsetting each of the stems so that they do look more realistic. If they're all lined up, then it's not going to look quite right. Now, depending on what you're planning to use this for, if you need the stem to look the most realistic, I recommend that you thicken it up with some additional paper. You could just leave it as is and wrap it in the floral tape all the way down to the base. However, that's going to look quite thin at the bottom compared to the sort of the chunkier areas at the top where you've got several pieces of wire. So what you can do is just use strips of scrap crepe paper. So I actually use this blue that came in a multi-pack that I don't really use for anything else. So this is a perfect way to use up any of your scraps, or if you just don't want to use a colour that you really like. So just cut your strips and then cover them in glue, wrap them around the stem to add the thickness, and then once you're happy with the thickness, just go back over that with the floral tape to get the right colour. And if you wanted to use a different coloured crepe paper rather than floral tape, this is also a good way to finish off by just wrapping them there and then they're the right colour. And then I just do one last tweak where I adjust all the positions, make sure I'm happy with them. And that's your finished stem. So I hope you found that useful and that you have some beautiful paper berries at the end of it. I'd love to see how they turn out, so if you're happy to share, then be sure to tag me on Instagram. It's at @tarmuchley_paperblooms, or on Facebook. Make sure that you're subscribed to my channel so that you get notified when my next video goes live. I'll be adding more tutorials and paper flower tips and tricks regularly, so make sure that you don't miss out on those. You can also join my email list at tarmuchleypaperblooms.com, which means you'll be the first to know when things go live and also any new products that launch. And you also get exclusive discounts that are not available anywhere else, so make sure you join up to that. In the meantime, make sure you check out my other videos for more paper flower making advice. And I'll see you back here again very soon. Happy flower making!